Hey there, and welcome to my new player guide series, focused on the DLC, The Last Divinity. So this is something a little bit different than what I've normally been doing for my guides, where they've been very comprehensive and over-explained and tend towards being really long. I want to run and have some 20-minute crash course videos targeted towards new players, actually, as opposed to the super experienced, for those trying to get into the DLC for the first time and looking for tips in general. So this might be good for someone who just got the DLC and has played the base game before, so has a little bit of experience with some basic ideas of the game. This will also be good for brand new players picking up the game on the Nintendo Switch or whatever console or platform. So the hope is that I'm going to be creating much shorter length videos with less detail in general than my hyper comprehensive guides, but still focusing on the important topics and kind of moving through them a little quickly. You might not get 20 minutes of me talking about a specific champion path. Instead, you're going to get maybe a quick crash course on which champion paths are good, for instance. So what we're going to be doing in this first video is I'm going to be cycling through all 6 clans. I recognize I already have a Wormkin clan guide, but that's okay. That is a very over-explained video intended towards advanced audiences at Covenant 25. This is going to be more intro. And so we'll start with Hellhorned. That's what we're going to be doing today. So hopefully this ends up being useful. As a reminder, though, you can leave a comment with your ideas for other guides if you have them for what you'd like to see me make. This could be advanced guides for longer over-explained styles or shorter little mini guides for things that I think are potentially useful, but don't need that much discussion. Also, of course, like the video, subscribe if you want to see more of this stuff, and let's get into it. So I'm going to hop over here to the logbook. We're not going to play a run here, and we're going to focus on Hellhorned. So Hellhorned in general is among what I consider to be the 4 quote-unquote good middle-of-the-pack clans. And those clans are Hellhorned, Awoken, Stygian, and Wormkin. I consider these 4 really good clans that have all the solutions you need to win, but in general it's pretty tough to identify which of them is stronger than which because they all have advantages and disadvantages. So Hellhorned is in that pack, which means you should be fine seeing it. Generally it's something I like working with, so yeah, fair enough. The first thing I want to hit on, because this is focused on the DLC, I will be showing you the new unit. This unit, Apex Imp, is a new draw priority rare unit introduced in the DLC. So if you're just picking up the DLC for the first time, you will now start seeing this unit automatically in your runs. It's rare, so it might not be every run, of course, but you will see it periodically. And at a brief glance, this unit is nuts. I think this is actually the strongest unit in the game by such a wide margin that you can take it at any given point and win the run. I did make a video on the Train of Thought series that goes in extreme depth with this unit, talks a lot more about it, and generally speaking, also shows a run that uses the unit. So if you're looking for more detail, check out that video, but otherwise, I'll just at a high level explain what this thing does. Essentially, it is a 1 Ember 2 space unit with 10/10 stats, and when it gains armor, it gains rage equal to the amount of armor gained. Because armor is so common in the clan and rage is so strong, you can imagine that you play something like Fortify on this. For 0 Ember, you get half of a ritual battle for free. It also starts with 5 armor on its own. It's crazy. You can imagine some cases where this goes absolutely ballistic, with a welder helper getting 20 rage off of a welder helper. You give this quick multi-strike, you win the game. You dupe it, you give it steelworker essence, etc., etc. It goes pretty crazy. There's not a lot else to say here. Basically, I think if you see this unit, you should click it because it wins for you. Hands down. And so that's really all I'm going to say on this one right now. Next, I am going to dig into what I consider to be bog standard strategies for Hellhorned in the DLC. So, the first strategy I want to talk about are imps. Imp, or we'll just say imps. And So the interesting thing is imps are extremely good in the DLC. They were really good in the pre-DLC, by the way. They were just solid choices. But they're even better now, and the reason is because of the unit infusion mechanic, where you can infuse a unit into another unit. Most imps, outside of a couple, like Pyre Chomper, for instance, or Transcend Imp, give their own ability or something similar to it into the other unit. So you could say put a Fledgling Imp, which gives Rage 5 on summon to the whole floor, into a Welder Helper, and then you're getting survivability and a ton of HP scaling out of it at the same time. So, really powerful. And then, as you might imagine, this gets even sillier because of Transcend Imp. So, if all of the essences for imps have summon abilities on them, except for Pyre Chomper, as I said, and Transcend Imp, then when you play a Transcend Imp, you're not only getting the value out of the base units, the imps themselves, you're getting it out of their infusions, which is crazy strong. This scales very rapidly, very quickly to the point where you're overpowering units in survivability or, damage. This does rely on two of, in my opinion, the best cards in the clan, Welder Helper, which is an exceptional defensive line, and Fledgling Imp, which got buffed in the DLC to Rage 5 from Rage 3, very cool, and is an extremely good offensive line. The combo of those two in any form pretty much can, I don't want to say guarantee a win, but it gives you a really solid direction that you should lean into. So, I think that's excellent. There are some good ones. Molting Imp's Infusion does 15, which with Ashes of the Fallen can double. Obviously, all these summon triggers can be doubled as well with Ashes of the Fallen, infusions as well. I do want to call special attention here to Queen's Impling. It's not a good card on its own, but its infusion says deal 40 damage to the front enemy unit. You can infuse that into Transcend Imp and then put Endless into Transcend Imp. And if you find all three of these combo pieces, so Transcend Imp, Queen's Impling, and Endless, you just win the game because Transcend Imp will deal 40 damage, double that, and then every time you replay Transcend Imp, you get more and more, and eventually this not only clears entire waves very fast, this clears and kills the boss. This will obliterate Seraph and the Divinity pretty comfortably. Normally I would then dupe it once you have that sort of infused combo set up. Very strong. It's one of the only real great things about Queen's Implings in general in the DLC, so pretty solid overall. And then obviously, Impish Scholar lets you do a lot of really silly things in the DLC as well. All the consume cards that you can imagine in the clan, things like Last Stand, Reinforce, Imp in a Box, Alloy of the Ancients, whatever, they all come back with an Impish Scholar. If you're repeating this, or you have it on Endless, or you infuse it into something else, you can quickly imagine getting a ton of value out of this. So, Imps in general, awesome. Really strong. I think that's one of the most obvious and powerful lines. It can be easy to underestimate them, but they get there. The next thing I want to hit on is Rage. Rage is a very powerful offensive scaling plan for all clan combos, and Hellhorn does it best. So, a lot of clans have some kind of rage in it, like Paraffin Enforcer applies rage to the floor on Melting, or Nameless Siren gives itself rage on Incant in Stygian, for instance. But Hellhorned is all about it. Not only do they have the powerful rage scaling relics, Resonant Shard, and a collection of tails, they additionally have really good cards for applying it. The two big ones that I think I should call attention to here are Fledgling Imp and Ritual of Battle. It's worth noting they're both commons, okay? And because they're commons, you only see them in the first two clan pickups. If you see one, I almost always pick one because it will always give you some kind of offensive scaling that will benefit you late game. This also is excellent into a quick sweeper. In the DLC in general, sweeping units are very powerful, so they're worth taking, they're worth considering, and giving sweeping units tons of damage and giving them quick lets them kill entire floors before they get attacked, which makes that line very strong. And also, because the Divinity is on every floor all the time, you can get something like half the Divinity's life dealt in damage before Relentless even starts. So it's really powerful, and then all you need is some kind of a front line for it, and voila, you have successfully won the run. So definitely be eyeballing the ability to rage scale, whether it's through Endless Fledgling Imp or -2 Ritual of Battle, spammed a bunch of times. and scale those things up to good levels. Some other things that are worth noting, if I get rid of this, there is a rare unit, Deranged Brute, that turns basically any rage generation into a game-winning plan very quickly. If you see this unit and you have one of Fledgling Imp or Ritual Battle, you're pretty much winning out of the gate. There is, of course, a Dark Deal, which I think is really exceptional as well. So this is fine. You see it as a rare card. Rage 7 for 0 is solid, right? I think that's excellent. With some armor, the 5 damage doesn't matter, and it's a pretty flexible card. So this is the other component of rage generation here I think is good. And then, of course, Last Stand does Last Stand things, doubling your rage. Pretty crazy. We've already talked about Apex Imp. I do want to give Branded Warriors Infusion some credit. Slay, apply Rage 3 to friendly units. You put that in a Sweeper. Of course, the Sweeper starts killing things. It kills things even faster and then continues and continues to get better and better. You get to the point where you're scaling so fast, you're killing mini-bosses on the Divinity with your sweep unit, which is usually the threshold where you know you're going to win that run, right? That's the, oh yeah, I obviously win this point. So I think that's pretty powerful overall. I will give some bonus points as well to Alpha Fiend, which works kind of in a similar way with its infusion. Makes the unit bigger, but every time you hit anything, it gets +5 attack. So with Sweep, you hit everything on the floor, you get +5 attack for each. You can imagine this is tons of scaling. It's good. I think it can sometimes bait people because they're not playing it correctly or they overestimate how fast it scales. You do want to have some additional help for your unit, right? If you're just relying on this, the first initial waves will walk by you. So be mindful of that. But it is excellent regardless. And that's essentially Rage. I next want to hit on armor and something that I consider Hellhorned extremely good at, which is building your own tank. Your front lines don't really have to be something that seems defensive. You can kind of just put armor and temporary hit points on literally any unit and it will be fine. Sometimes your front lines might be an Apex Imp, in which case you're giving it so much armor that it also is your tank and then also is killing things. The two big cards that I think matter, they're kind of shown right here on the bottom. You have Welder Helper, which is an exceptional card. It's out of control strong at 20 armor. Its essence gives the unit armor 10 and summon apply armor 10 to the whole floor, which is good and bad sometimes. You're going to want some way of killing your imp with this, but really strong in general because it's just, floor-wide survivability, which helps offset sweep on the Divinity. Steelworker is just AoE 5 armor every turn. And you can imagine you have like 3 of these things on a floor. Maybe it's self-infused or whatever for your front line. You can outscale incoming damage pretty quickly and also defend your back lines. Very good. This unit is exceptional. Hard to say no to that. And then, of course, I think Alloy of the Ancients is one of the best cards in Clan. It's so far ahead of the curve. It's 1 Ember for 25 armor, which is huge. That's an insane amount of value, and the consume is sometimes beneficial with things like Etch and Wormkin, or maybe with Impish Scholar to bring it back. I think in general you're looking to pay 1 Ember for 10 armor on average is the way I like to think of it. Branding Right is 2 Ember for 20, March of Shields is 1 for 10, and then Fortify is 0 for 5. It's a pretty good ratio in general. So as you can see, Welder Helper's a bit ahead. It's 1 for 20, but you're also paying a space, and you might have some downsides to that, harvests and things like that. So, yeah, otherwise, pretty straightforward. Inflame is a terrible card, though. Don't take it. It's really bad right now. Please buff it. Shiny Shoe. I would almost never pick this unless I was desperate. So, yeah. Build your own tanks. Turn pretty much anything into a frontline for you. Seems good to me. And then I do want to also talk about some of their units next. So, specifically, their uncommons, their clan units, because I think they have some flexible backlines. This is your damage dealing line. You're essentially looking for something that takes rage well, something that scales well. The bread and butter here is Horned Warrior. With the DLC, it got changed to Multi-Strike 1 with 15x2. Really good card. You can just take this, put rage on it, and scale this to a point where it's killing, give it multi-strike on its own, and it will kill slap. Hits 3 times, does a lot of damage, really good. I'm a big fan of this card. If you have any kind of need for a backline, he's your man. He also takes a lot of other infusions particularly well, especially Branded Warrior, because he hits twice, so maybe you get multiple slays in that, pretty good. I don't think Branded Warrior is a particularly good backline in general unless you already have something like Gurg's Goad in order to kind of give it some oomph, but it's still going to need some help beyond that as well. I think that Rail Beater is better than you might be expecting with the change in the DLC. It applies melee weakness 1 to the attacked unit. If you can find any source of multi-strike for this, then it quickly gets very strong because its first hit applies multi-strike, and then it capitalizes on the melee weakness. I mean, its first hit applies melee weakness, and then it capitalizes on that melee weakness in the second hit, which essentially means he's doing kind of like 3 hits worth of damage, basically. And then his final hit, if the thing lives, leaves melee weakness on for whatever's behind him or the pyre. Pretty good in general. I'm a big fan. It's also worth noting, Horned Warrior's Essence gives multi-strike 1 and Fragile, which is scary. Fragile's hard to play into, but the 30 baseline armor on Railbeater means that this is one of the best units to put it into. Just giving it multi-strike is exceptional. So, I think that's a very good solution. Demon Fiend is terrible, and Alpha Fiend is big and expensive. It's very rare I use this unit, right? I'm almost always going to be infusing this unit into something else. That's the plan anyway. Sweeper, something that hits multiple times, Animus of Will, whatever. So, pretty straightforward there. They're rare units. We already hit on Apex Imp. Deranged Brute, excellent, already talked about. Consumer of Crowns is kind of scary. You can imagine the cursed banner of Consumer of Crowns and Demon Fiend. I've seen it before. Basically unplayable in most combos. You always want to have backups in case you roll into that, but it is pretty rare, fortunately, thanks to Consumer being a rare card. This unit is fine. I don't usually recommend taking it unless you already have a ton of imps and can somehow pull it off. Also, its essence is abysmal. Don't ever use it. And that's basically it. I usually skip this unit, but sometimes it works. And that's essentially the units you've got. I think overall they're pretty strong. You've got a lot of good hits. You'll usually find something you want, but there are some duds, as you might expect. So, the next thing I want to hit on is a card that I think is incredible in the DLC that I want to draw attention to. Inferno is nuts. The Divinity combat has a lot of multiple units, right? And most of them cap out at around 100-ish HP. There's obviously the big dudes, but if you slap Inferno on a random floor on the Divinity, you're either killing everything or killing most things, and whatever you leave behind is fragile and will get run over by your floor, otherwise you're in real dire straits. 2 Infernos kills virtually everything. There's a couple units that live that, but if you do have 2 Infernos that you can play regularly, you're winning already. This card, almost always an automatic pick, in my opinion. I don't think it's broken. I think it's a really important part of what makes the clan good, though. So hopefully they never nerf it. But you basically give this thing 2 -1s or a value stone -2, and you just dupe it whenever you can. It's really good. So, big fan. I think this card, once you start taking it more, will increase your win rates drastically. And the last thing I want to hit on is I'm going to jump over to the relics, because I think this clan has a lot of busted relics that will make you win a ton of runs in the DLC. You've got Ashes of the Fallen, double your summon triggers. Imps are already good. This makes them better. You've got the 2 Rage relics, Collection of Tales and Resonant Shard. Just make Rage, which is already exceptional, even stronger. You've got Railhammer, which turns all of your armor cards up to 11, really powerful. Demon units are good, we just talked about this, and giving demon units multi-strike, unsurprisingly, is really good. Gurg's Goad is excellent. You can do some degenerate stuff with Unbroken Horn, with collecting Ember and then playing massive X-Cost cards. Not always a slam dunk, but this does open up some lines. And then imps are good, right? So Imp Sickle, Queen's Tail, these are both great relics. There's a lot of good hits here, is kind of the most important thing. So I tend to value the high rolls highly, and I'll look for them when I can benefit from them. So always worth it to be mindful of that. I think this clan has a really good set of relics in general, so big fan of that. I definitely want to touch on the champions a little bit. Not going to spend a lot of time talking about these. Prince, in general, is pretty bad, I will say. Brawler, right here, has gotten really good in the DLC. 4 multi-strike is excellent, hit 5 times. Takes Rage, takes plus attack, any kind of scaling, and this thing goes mad with power. If you can support this, and you have a start that makes this usable, like with Ritual of Battle or Fledgling Imp, this is excellent. You should take it, and it probably wins you the game. If you don't see Brawler, or Brawler is unusable, take Wrathful. And Wrathful will get you through the early game. It will do fine. It, with some relic combinations, can do okay into the late game, but in general, it just kind of gets carried by everything else and doesn't really contribute much. So I typically throw it away and then solve my run some other way with my units at that level. I think that's kind of, those are your options. Avoid Reaper at all costs. Obviously, you could be shown a really cursed run with Brawler Reaper start at a very bad Brawler beginning. You might have to take Reaper to begin with. It'll at least get you through Ring 3, but then don't commit to this because otherwise your champion is dead. Certainly, if you have to commit to it, you can just kind of leave it around and then play some strategy that doesn't need your champion. Champions are optional in the DLC. You have to have them, but you don't need them to win your run. Your run can be won off of the back of your infused units pretty comfortably in a lot of situations, so... Shardtail Queen is in a little bit of a better situation, I think. Imperialist is still exceptional. Turns out something with 80 health that throws imps for 40 damage an imp is really strong. You can give it Welder Helper and Endless, and then it just gets armor, throws the Welder Helper, win, clears all backlines, does a lot of good work. You could give a Fledgling Imp or an Impish Scholar or a Pyre Chomp or something, Endless, and then plus 25 life, or a Large Stone, stick it in front, it tanks the hits and then gets thrown. Very good. It's a good strategy as well. Pretty much throwing one Imp is always good. If you imagine ever turns where you can throw two Imps, that's basically an Inferno, more or less. You're basically throwing Inferno every turn, and I just talked about how good Inferno is, so unsurprisingly that is excellent. And then if you don't see Imperialist or it doesn't make sense, Imp Parade is fine. I think Imp Parade 2 is really good because of the Fledgling Imp buff. It is, it's a difference from what I would say pre-DLC, right? I think this was bad back when Fledgling Imp sucked, but now that Fledgling Imp is good, well, it turns out spawning those and getting them for free on your floor is really strong. This can just be your strict scaling plan, right? And you just win off of this. And all you have to do is somehow keep it alive on a lower floor while your top floor scales. Going all in on this is fine. You can give it the Fledgling... You can give it the Welder Helper, rather, to tank for it, and you can give your higher floor the Fledgling Imp to scale. Pretty good strategy overall. I would avoid royalty at all costs here. It scales to good attack numbers, but it only hits once, and Divinity Waves have a lot of units. It falls off pretty hard. There's the high roll where you see Trample Umberstone on this, but that's a specific clan combo, requires a specific rare unit. Rare card. I would not lean into it. I would just avoid that. And truly, I think that is Shardtail Queen and Champions in a nutshell. So I think that's really everything I need to say here in this video. I'm going to keep it short. We're at a cool 22 minutes, so I won't take up more of your time. In general, I think this clan is really strong. It's a good clan, has good options. Champions are a little iffy, but, Queen is serviceable, and you can make Brawler pretty strong in most cases. It has some dead units, but it has a lot of good ones, too. So... definitely not the strongest clan, but certainly not the weakest either. I'm usually also pretty happy to see this as a secondary clan. Torch is great, pings are strong, unsurprisingly, kill enemy units. Queen Zempling, though, is a pretty rough secondary clan starter. It's expensive, hard to play, takes space, bad infusion for Wormkin, it's not an in-can, there's a lot of problems with it. But like I said, you can just win the game off of a Transcendent hit with Endless on that, so... maybe keep one around just in case. Otherwise, I get rid of them. But that's it. Hellhorned, it's good. And hopefully this is useful. So, yeah, I don't have much else to offer. So I really appreciate you taking time to listen to this. And, you can feel free to like the video, leave a comment if you have thoughts, things you think I missed or you want clarifications on. I'll happily answer. And stay tuned for the next one, because I'll be doing Awoken next. Take care, folks.